Hi everybody, Roy here at Northwind, and I'm very excited today to have Kathryn from Lurie Garden here to give a talk about the Lurie Garden, about plant selections, about use of plants. It's a very cool happening at Northwind. And Kathryn, why don't you share with everyone how you got to be Kathryn?
All right.
Very cool.
Well, I am the head horticulturist at Lurie Garden, and I've been there for a little over 2 years now. I'm charged with the management of the garden as a whole and kind of guiding its evolution into the future. I started out studying environmental science and working more in the habitat restoration field. I've always had a love for plants that started honestly probably by my mom, who was a big gardener. And over time I got more involved in public gardens and worked at the Chicago Botanic Garden for a long time before I came to Lurie. But plants have always been a part of my life, and I'm happy that they continue to do so.
You just had a walkthrough with Pete.
Yeah.
That was exciting. Yeah.
It was amazing to have the master himself there teaching us about how to lay out plants, how to have an element of surprise, a little bit of fun, and also really he was emphasizing how to keep balance and harmony in the garden, and that was a really valuable lesson.
I think I have to say Pete had a lot to share with me when I met him. One thing I always remember he told me when I first met him, Roy, stretch your patterns out. I had them too choppy, and that simple thing I keep always thinking about, stretch your patterns. So
that is very helpful, especially in an older garden. It's very easy to just kind of design bit by bit, and then all of a sudden it feels disconnected.
Right,
so you gotta make it unified still.
Choppy.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you're here, so on with the talk. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Okay, so I guess we're gonna start then?
Yeah.
All right, cool. So, hello everybody. Thanks for coming out. Good morning. My name's Kathryn Deery. I'm the head horticulturist of Lurie Garden, and Lurie Garden is located downtown Chicago in Millennium Park. It opened with the rest of the park in 2004, and it's designed by the landscape architects GGN and the plant designer Pete Outolf. There was a lighting designer as well, so it was a whole collaborative effort. I've been with Lurie Garden for 2 years now. This is my 3rd season. And I'm going to share with you today some of the newer perennial plant combinations that we've been trying out in Lurie Garden in the past couple years. So, as maybe some of you know, when you start in a garden or inherit a garden, that, you buy a house and you just get what you get. You don't know, what you're gonna have. There's gonna be good things, bad things, and how do we work with all of that? How do we assess our garden and improve it in kind of small ways? So the interesting thing about Lurie Garden and it being nearly 20 years old is that original design is not really there exactly anymore. And part of my job is to uphold the integrity of the design. So not, plant for plant. I'm not trying to make it exact as when it went in 2004. I'm more guiding the evolution of the garden and managing it as it continues to grow and shift and kind of move around, because plants are going to do what plants want to do. So there's no sense in kind of forcing them to stay in one place. And Pete Outolf shared a very, I feel like it really hit home with me. He said, the design is gone. This is now a landscape, and you're charged with maintaining balance and harmony. And I think that's, really what we do as gardeners is we're looking at our space and assessing, does it feel good? Does it feel balanced? Does it feel harmonious? What feels off? And sometimes it's hard to put, a word to that feeling. So we're going to kind of talk about some of those ideas today. You all have a plant list. Those plants are all in Lurie Garden, and on our website, we have our full plant list on our website. Each plant has a profile, so you can go there to learn more about the plants as well. All right, so the first one I wanted to talk about is kind of a smaller area in Lurie Garden. So When you are approaching a space to think about what plants do I want to go here, one important thing to think about is how am I viewing this space? Is it raised up? Is it low? Is there a backdrop? You know, how am I interacting with the space and how am I looking at it? So the space that I'm thinking of in Lurie Garden is a corner, and I'm telling you, the corners are always the problem. I don't know why, but it's the corners. And it's a tight corner that you come around on the shady side of the garden, and the bed is kind of like knee height, so you look down on the plants. So knowing that I'm looking down on that area, that's going to tell me, all right, how do I want to see these plants? What do I want to use? And there were a few different things in this corner. It was fine, but it wasn't anything spectacular. So what we did is we started over from this area, and it's kind of like painting a wall and then hanging frames. First you start with the paint color of the wall. So we want our base layer. So we started with Sesleria autumnalis. We used Greenlee Hybrid, but this is just the straight species. This is a great versatile grass. I really like this one. It's pretty neat. It comes up earlier in the season, so you get some interest straight away. Really nice color. So often when I'm laying out a planting, I usually start with the grass first. So put that as my base layer. Now I've got my wall painted, so we've got a good start. Now how do we add a little bit of pizzazz, something of interest? And so after that, we added some Veronica, some speedwell, and this one has a more pink flower, but it doesn't really, I'm not really thinking about color here, I'm thinking about texture. And so I just kind of dot those in. Hi, kitty. This is the best. Okay, so, you know, again thinking, and this is actually the right view of the space as well. So I've got my grass, I've added another plant, a perennial that's gonna bloom kind of mid-late summer. And again, looking down, because I'm looking down on the space, I want kind of like a daisy shaped looking flower. So then we added in Stokesia. And again, because the space is tight, I want things with unique details because I'm going to be able to really take them in and see them up close. I'm looking at it very closely, not far away. So it's an opportunity to use something that is really fun and detailed and that you can really take in and spend time with. So that's the Stokesia, which I don't have here, but I do feel like the Centaurea kind of has like that similar unique flower that you could dot in where it has these kind of, it like is feathery at the end. So you can take in those details, or I would dot in Monarda bradburyana, the eastern bee balm. I love this plant so much. Maybe this is old news to all of you, but I think it's fantastic. Early bloomer, native, has some nice foliage color, kind of purple tinge. The seed heads stay and provide interest long into the season. And that's what I love. We're not doing any deadheading really in Lurie Garden. We leave the seed heads up both for interest and for wildlife. So then I just add in a little bit of Monarda, and these are your 3 plants for a very simple combination. And it really works because I'm not trying to do anything crazy. I want to be able to take in the details of the plant, and I know I'm looking down on it, so I can really kind of enjoy the whole design. So that is kind of one thing to think about when you're looking at a space and trying to figure out how you're going to combine perennials. I do often start again with that grass, like what is my base layer gonna be. So the next thing I wanted to talk about when thinking about how to make perennial plant combinations, you know, we were saying when you inherit a garden or come into a space that's already existing, a lot of the times you have to figure out what is wrong with the space or what doesn't feel right. And you can run through a number of things in your mind as a checklist to decide, how do I need to make this better, or what can I do to improve it? So when it comes to making combinations of perennials, you want to think about a plant's texture. So its leaf, its flower. This is a grass has a very delicate texture versus something like the speedwell that has a more coarse texture. And you also want to think about form. So is a plant sprawling, low, mat forming, or is it tall? Is it gonna seed around, just dot around? What is it gonna do? So, and then also of course bloom time as well. So we had this other area in Lurie Garden that was geraniums and also heuchera or coral bells. Are you all familiar with the heuchera leaf shape? It's not so far off from the geranium, kind of flat like that. I'd call it a coarse texture. And so we were looking at this area and it had geranium, Claridge Druce, and then heuchera autumn bride. And two great plants. I love them. They're wonderful. But kept walking by and thinking, God, this is boring. Like, why do I not like this spot? What is the deal? Again, it was a corner. I'm telling you, it was corners. And so what we decided to do was remove the heuchera, because we felt like the heuchera and the geranium, such a similar leaf texture, just too much of the same. So there we didn't have good contrasting texture. That's how we figured that out. So we removed the heuchera and we removed some of the geranium, but primarily left that. And then we realized we needed to add another texture. So we added Carex montana, which is a wonderful Carex, and it'll get about 1 foot wide, very soft and kind of arching over, mound forming. And so that's our kind of low, more fine texture. And then we added Lobelia siphilitica in there for kind of a little bit of getting some height, getting a different color, different bloom time. So the geranium will bloom first, and then you'll get the Lobelia later in the season. So again, I'm thinking about texture. Do I have contrast in texture? Do I have things happening in different seasons? So now I'm going to tell you about where we went wrong. Geraniums are, sorry?
Being in the corner.
Oh yeah, being in a corner. So geraniums can take up a lot of space, and this geranium Claridge Druce, it blooms for a very long time, but it gets ginormous. And so we got these plants from Roy, the Carex montana, this size, put them in, and they're still trying to come along and fill in their space, but the geranium has just eaten them up, eaten them alive, and I'm sure Roy would have been like, I told you so. But so when you are thinking about how you're going to combine perennials, what you're going to take out, what you're going to add, plant size matters, and then proportion matters. So it's kind of scary, but I feel like we should have left maybe 3 geraniums and that's it. And the great thing is, like, if you're doing it, especially in a space that you return to a lot, your home, or, you know, another garden that you get to go to frequently, you can keep coming back and making those edits, we call them. And that's a huge part of my job, is constantly editing the garden. Make a change, let it establish, see how it goes, come back, make another change. And, you know, we're trying to move away from that term maintenance, because that kind of says like, oh, you're maintaining the status quo of a garden. No, we're managing the garden, we're guiding it, we're helping it move in a certain direction. So what we're gonna do is remove more geranium and add more Carex. And what I maybe would have considered is getting the Carex in a gallon size, so then I have it taking up more space straight away. Another tip that I learned from Roy is planting 2 together to get a bigger plant faster. And so Pete Outolf came just a few weeks in June and was walking through the garden, and we were doing a consult and giving us some new ideas. And he looked at this area and he felt like it needed just one more thing. And that's what you'll learn over time as you start working on your perennial plant combinations. Start with 2 things, start with 3 things, and then just keep adding in layers of complexity as you feel comfortable. So his suggestion was to add a fern, and this one is leatherwood fern, but we're gonna add a Christmas fern because we have it elsewhere in Lurie Garden, and then it'll help two different places feel more connected. But this is just one more layer of contrast with texture, and then a really nice form. So both the Carex and the Geranium have this kind of low moundy form, whereas the Lobelia and the fern are more upright. And then this will probably crash in the winter and not look very interesting, but we'll get a little more winter interest from the Carex and maybe the fern fronds staying up a little bit. So seasonality can mean a number of things, and you have to decide, like, what does that mean to you? Do you want flowers in every month? Do you want seed heads in every month? You know, it's a very personal thing. So that was the lesson. The key lessons from this space are, one, go through your checklist of how to figure out what doesn't feel right. Is there contrast in texture? Is there contrast in form? Is there seasonality? And then when you make the changes, start small and then continue to edit. So this is not the exact plants that we have in Lurie Garden, but this combination is Schizocurium hahatonka, which is it's a little bluer, but a lot fuzzier and more of a it has more height and a little more of a narrow habit. This is Schizocurium Little Luke, which I also adore this plant, so get lots of these. But what happened is we had some Rudbeckia in one spot, but it was just a couple in one area, and it felt sort of random. And then we were gifted some of the hahatonkas to try out in the garden, and that is a plant to keep your eye out for. It is.
That was the small one?
It's not exactly this one, but it's a different one. We just can't get it right now anywhere. So the hahatonka is just much bluer and really fuzzy hairs all along the blades. So we were gifted the hahatonka, which we tried out in the garden. And then again, when we're assessing what needs to be done, how do we make changes, I see 3 Rudbeckia in this one corner, but nowhere else in the garden. So repetition is really helpful, and having each of your areas feel connected as a whole is another huge thing. So especially in an older garden, it's very easy to redesign corner by corner by corner by corner, and then you end up with like 10 different designs in one space and nothing unifying the whole area. So okay, you need to redesign this one area, but how is it going to relate to everything else? And that, I will say, is a hard lesson to learn, and something that Pete has really been helping us do. So we make a change to one spot, but then have one plant that connects the whole area. So anyways, the Schizocurium hahatonka, but this is Little Luke. This also gets some bluer foliage and red tones in there, and it's a much shorter Schizocurium. And then we paired it with Rudbeckia, so Black-Eyed Susan. This has more height. Obviously, you can see we've got our 2 different textures, 2 different forms, and then, all right, where did we go wrong? This thing. You only need like 1. They get huge. So we added way too many, and it was starting to eat the Schizocurium alive. So you can see a theme here. We get too excited, order too many plants. So try to practice a little self-control, I guess, is the lesson here. And then the other thing, this is just a personal style. You know, everybody has their own way of doing things, but with brighter hot colors, typically in a garden designed by Pete Outolf, he uses them in a more subtle way. So something as bright as the Rudbeckia, it's dotted and they're far apart. So I'd say the area is probably like, I don't know, 50 feet long, and we need to have like 5 Rudbeckia in that whole space, just dotted here and there, and then the Schizacherium kind of flowing in. Of course, everything else, but this is more of just a little surprise. The other thing that we really liked about this combination and learned from it is subtle color matching. So often when we think about designing using color, we're really hyper-focused on the flower, but think about the color of the foliage. So you can't see it now, but again, this will have more of a blue tinge, and that blue tinge from the foliage looks great with this sort of like white fuzzy underside of the Rudbeckia, and then the yellow flower with the blue foliage looks really good together. So I like to think about like not just, okay, blue and yellow, great color combination. I'm not gonna have a blue flower and a yellow flower. I'm gonna have blue foliage, yellow flower, or chartreuse foliage and blue flower. So it's not just about the flower. You want to think about how does the plant look in its entirety. All right. So this next area is in Lurie Garden that I'm thinking of that this plant combination came from. It had, I forget, we counted, I don't know, maybe 10 different plants in it, something like that. So at home, think of your junk drawer, right? Everyone's got a junk drawer, has a ton of stuff in it. It's all really useful and valuable, and you want it, right, in theory, but it looks like hell. So like, how do we improve our junk drawer? And this is one of those situations where it was like, I like all these plants, but it's like way too much, too chaotic, way too many things happening. So I think that a lot of times what we do in our gardens is if we have a tough area we're struggling with, we just keep throwing plants at it. Like maybe this will fix it, maybe this will fix it. And sometimes the better thing to do is actually remove plants. And so I have to think of all the, so we removed, there was some goldenrod we removed monarda, Lythrum, a fern. There was a whole bunch of stuff that we removed and simplified, but it's still a pretty complex design. So what you can do is pick the plant that you like the least, take it out, give it a minute, assess, see how it goes, and then remove another one. And then give it some time, and then maybe you add a new one back in. And so what we did in this area, yes, simple is better, but it's also fun to go a little bit crazy, and you got to find the balance between the two. In this area, we have a Strontia Roma. So this one's not blooming, but has a very cute kind of pincushiony flower, light pink, and it holds its form really well, so very long lasting. So that's dotted in this kind of, I'd say 10 by 10 area. And then I couldn't find it here. We have Nadia pincushion, which is what's listed on your paper, but this is a scabiosa. Similar kind of pincushion ball flower. That's also dotted in. This is Salvia azurea, or azure sage, which has a light blue flower late in the season, so a very late blooming sage. Really cool, gets some nice height, and it spreads rhizominously as well. So I've got something kind of short, low, earlier blooming, and then the Nadia comes, and then we have in there a daylily actually, and it's Gentle Shepherd. That's not this one, it's a white one. But I think what is cool is like we see daylilies everywhere. We're all tired of them, they're boring. And same with hostas too. But they are still great plants, and you can use them in a different way. So rather than just having a block of daylilies, dot them into a space so it looks a little more interesting. And so it's kind of, this area has this more wild, meadowy look with all these little pincushion flowers. And then we've got a very large bloom from the daylily. So that contrast of a very big flower with a very delicate flower creates a lot of interest. And so I'm thinking more here how I've got contrasting flower shapes. And then also I've got things blooming in every season. So we've got the Strontia, we've got the pincushion, the daylilies, the azure sage, And then lastly, aster twilight dotted in as well. So in this planting, it's almost like a complete even mix where I've got maybe like 5 to 10 of everything, and they're all just like evenly distributed. That's more of a matrix style planting. Nothing's in groups. And it's a lot. And what I go back to in this area, I'm going back to what we talked about in the very beginning. How do I look at this area? It's a little bit higher up, and then it's got the hedge and the rest of the garden and the whole skyline in the backdrop. So I actually, having that like smooth background with the city buildings and everything, I can actually weirdly concentrate on all these tiny little details. So you wouldn't want to necessarily do something this complex in a huge area, because then all those little details get a little bit lost, but you can still have a fun amount of complexity in some smaller areas as well. So, has anybody been to Lurie Garden?
Oh yeah.
Okay. You know, our aesthetic is more naturalistic, and we're about half native and then half ornamental plants. But so we are finding ways to, you know, you still want to have a sense of fun, a sense of play in your garden. So you've got like a lot of grasses, a lot of natives, things are looking really nice, and then you want to add something crazy like this sea holly. So this was a Pete recommendation, and they tried it in the garden some time ago. We're giving it another try just to see if it works. I will say it's a bit of a diva in that it needs space to get established, so you gotta really think about that. But we put it in this area where we have mostly the Polystichum Cassian, so a fountain grass. And then it was another kind of junk drawer situation where we needed to clean everything up. So we removed a lot of plants, made it much more simple, added Salvia crystal blue. So this has got a very pale blue flower. And then this Eryngium big blue is just dotted in very sparingly. Again, it's so tempting to be like, this plant is crazy, I love it, I want 100 of them, so I really make a huge impact. But it's actually more impactful to use it in a lighter way and just kind of dot it in. And the other kind of trick you can do, and Pete uses this a lot in his designs, is you have one of these a little bit closer to the edge of the garden bed and then dotted further back into the garden, and that carries your eye further in to then start taking in the rest of the garden. So you can use plants to pull people's vision further in. So the crystal blue has that same kind of blue color, so I'm color matching a little bit there, where I get this blue first and then this comes after. And then we stopped deadheading and trying to get like a full second bloom on our salvia. We actually really like just having the calyxes left behind, and they have this sort of soft quality that then softens almost the harshness of this plant. I mean, you could say it's harsh, or you could say it's very architectural. So if you have something that is really like standing out, use plants to soften it a little bit. So you're softening it and highlighting it at the same time. We didn't have any Polystichum here, so I just grabbed some Spirobolus prairie drop seed, which is a wonderful grass, forms a nice mound, arching mound, gets great color later in the year. It smells good. Obviously love this one. So when in doubt, if you're like, I can't figure out what to put in this area, try a grass or a Carex. And that can really make a difference and help other things stand out. And it provides long-standing interest as well. So this last combination I'm going to talk about is a bigger area that's probably 20 by 20 in Lurie Garden that we're completely redoing. We call it Bunny Hill, but that's because I think bunnies used to be eating all the plants in there. So it was kind of crazy. Like, Pete came last August. we were talking about this area, how it didn't really feel like it was working. And he just came up with this combination on the spot. So I was like, all right, in the presence of a master. We're really excited to see how it goes. And this is, something that I'll have to keep, updating you all on and tell you, so I haven't learned all the lessons yet, but I'm really excited to see how it goes. We're starting with the, bloopers, Andropogon Blackhawks, which will get really big and tall. And this is a sunny area. And this is something where we added, so I said 20 by 20, we added maybe like 7 grasses in that space. And they're gonna get pretty big, and we might even have to remove some later on if it starts to take up too much space. And then these colors aren't quite the same, but Geranium Patricia is the geranium we added in there, is more of like a hot pink. But so I lay out my grasses, we've got my nice height, structural interest, and then I start filling in around there. So I've got geraniums to fill in kind of low areas and have an early bloom. So you can kind of see this coming together. I wanted to make sure to have something that kind of spilled out over the edge of the wall as well, and that's where the geranium come in. And then we constantly think about, how does the light hit the plants? How does the wind hit the plants? Wind and grasses, I know I'm getting a little like out there, but it's amazing. Like hearing that rustling, it's really relaxing, and I'm very excited for how tall these andropogons are gonna get and seeing them kind of move in the wind, and they've got this really beautiful color.
What's their height again?
They can get, I think, like 6 feet tall, pretty big. Okay. And then we've got more of the azure sage that we added in. And again, this is a unique sage in that it does kind of spread rhizominously. So when I put them in, I put them near one another so that they kind of can grow together to form a clump. I should go in order of bloom time. So the geraniums, and then we've got a pink salvia in there. We're gonna use Eveline, which was a P. Outolf selection. This is something else, a different pink one. So having a pink salvia kind of high up in the corner while our salvia river is going off will be really unique. And then for more height, we have Meadow Rue Thalictrum that we added in, and this has that really nice blue texture or blue color on the foliage, really nice stem, gets a very small cute pink flower.
How tall does that get?
Also very tall, like 6 feet tall, the one that we got. And then this is goldenrod golden fleece. We have the Solidago fireworks that we're using, which has a little more of a purplish tone to its leaves. And that's when I was talking about that will form clumps. It spreads rhizominously. So we group those together, leave a little more of some space for those. So that goes in there. And then we also, not the same, but we have Liatris aspera that's going in there, a later blooming Liatris. This is spicata. And this is gonna this is a plant where, knowing its habit, it's very, kind of narrow, tall. It's gonna stay put in this one spot. So you can just pop this in the middle of other plants to add some interest. So I'm thinking about, here we've got a lot going on, but I think it's gonna look very full. Nothing is grouped too much. We grouped the geraniums kind of in like threes here and there, and the salvias as well. Let's say the salvias, the geraniums were both grouped in threes. Everything else was just dotted in there. So that'll be a fun new experiment. All right, so in conclusion, when you're making combinations, we're thinking about texture, we're thinking about plant form, seasonality, having a sense of play. How do you view the garden? Sometimes simple is better. Sometimes you want to go a little bit more complex, but you can take it step by step and just have fun and experiment. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks everybody. Appreciate you all coming.